coming into the Office of Early Learning and having the people like Lynette and Colleen and Dee and Karen just throw resources and resources and resources my way and learning about those pieces of early education. At the same time, my children were beginning their early education process. It was fascinating, and that you come to see that it is the most hands down critical time of education in a student's life, in a child's life. Absolutely the most critical. And what elementary school teachers and what early educators do, and especially go with early educators here in terms of being underpaid for what they must know and for what they do, it's absolutely mind blowing for the skill set that they have to have. So this is, and so when I speak the language of secondary education to my colleagues who are still kind of wondering what all those people are doing down there in playtime with their kids, it's really, you have a convert among, I'm a convert among them, and I work with them in conversation around that because it's a shame that there's not the opportunity, even though it might not benefit the students, for once in a while to throw a secondary educator down into a kindergarten classroom to see what it's like not to be able to go to the bathroom for an entire day. And to be surrounded by all of those needs. You know what I mean? You're not having a student say, oh, can I go to the bathroom? You're having a student that might be calling you from the bathroom. So it's very different, and not even to get into all of the instruction and the thought that goes into that instruction. So that's a little history for me, but I also, it also creates a lot of anxiety for me as a former secondary educator with the Common Core, the rigor, the demands on the students at the secondary level, things that are on the text list at the secondary level that I read in college, and not my freshman year in college. And so the demands around literacy are greater than they ever have been for the upper grades. And so the urgency to get it right at the early level causes me a little anxiety. I can't imagine the kind of anxiety early educators feel at this point with helping students to get a really solid foundation for learning. And it's that P3 continuum that we're talking about. Schools are really, districts, communities are really just now understanding, hopefully, what that P3 continuum means. And there's a lot more work to do, but this is, I'm very pleased, we're very pleased that New York State adopted the pre-kindergarten foundation for the Common Core. And I think it has the power to reduce the achievement gap if implemented correctly. So today we're going to talk about the pre-kindergarten foundation, understand the layout of the standards. Everybody's seen this already. All right. Has anyone done work inside it, or have you just kind of looked through it?
I think it varies.
Varies. Okay.
It depends upon where they're working.
Yep.
And how they're constructing their learning communities.
Okay. All right. It's a really great starting place. And Lynette can interrupt anytime she wants.
Can I do it now?
Yeah. You can do whatever you want, Lynette.
We work together all the time, so we're used to it.
I'm happy.
I just want to say that, we started, first New York State developed early learning standards, just for the early learners that we consider to be a treatment. And that was quite an experience. And I alone did not do that, for sure. If you have the booklet, I passed out some additional booklets because I kind of figured you wouldn't bring yours with you, but on the acknowledgments page, you can see there were lots and lots and lots of people that helped us put this whole thing together. It's right, it's kind of right inside, I think, about page 4. Karen was a big piece of this. I mean, Karen came from Syracuse to many meetings. We talked on the phone with NISPA, which was the early childhood Administrators Association that work closely with our office. Sherry Cleary, who we all know, is from SUNY. I mean, we had lots and lots and lots of help brainstorming and brainstorming and brainstorming. And I don't want to take any more minutes from Amy's presentation, but this was truly an effort of love and endurance, and it started back in 2007. So it took us a long time to go from the request of the field to have standards for pre-K children to honing it into how can we redo those traditional standards? Children will be able to blah, 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 great big long standards into the concise, shortened version that we see reflected in the Common Core. So I would like to say it's near and dear to my heart because I spent so many hours on this, but there's still room for suggestions, and this is a working document because it was primarily produced for online use. We can always go back and tweak it as we need to. So my email is up there. And make sure that when you do Panucci, you don't do Panucci, that you leave off the I or it goes out there to cyberspace and I never get it. We're only allowed 8 letters, so I had to get rid of the last one. So any feedback you have about this or about the Common Core standards, feel free to let me know and we can take your comments and you can be the next group we'll do about that I have to say.
I think many of us recognize the collaborators on the page.
Yeah. Well, there was lots and lots and lots of collaborators, for sure. And so it was not an effort that was done in isolation of the field. Everybody really got together and put their heads together. So, knowing that, take it away.
And in a state where the people who are running the game tend to be secondary educators, I felt that it was kind of a small win to get the pre-kindergarten foundation for the Common Core on Engage New York, as it stands alone. So that is one resource you can use to access that. We'll be talking about that a little bit later, but it is on that as the standard to go, as where to go for the pre-kindergarten standards. That this document is the place that we send people. So Lynette has covered some of those pieces, and the work group ended up reaching a consensus on the 10 guiding principles, and this was before the Common Core came out, that whole shorter, deeper, higher kind of piece. The Common Core, the standards are shorter, they are tighter, they are more rigorous, and that's kind of what this work group had already decided they were going to do. So the work group reached 10 guiding principles. The SAT examined the benchmarks of other states and developed the domains of learning closely aligned with the state learning standards. And then in 2010, New York State, the Education Department adopted the Common Core learning standards and included the pre-kindergarten standards for ELA and math in with that as the state's addition. New York State was one of 2 states to do that. And I think that has benefited us. So now we had two sets of standards for pre-kindergarten, which created all sorts of problems. But it really did bring attention, the other side, bring attention to the fact that this is really important. So after that, in 2011, we merged the 2 documents. And should I talk about that merging now or later? Because you'll get questions about this.
Well, I think the most important thing for you to remember that in this document as it exists right now, the Common Core developed standards, which were also developed in data by bumping down what the kindergarten requirements were, are embedded word for word in this document. And then the other work that happened is what you heard me say is we shortened up those very traditional learning standards that we use in New York State to very short little excerpts, and they're much more like bullets now. Those are they're concise, and then underneath them you see the little indicators, and those are the things that are observable behaviors, so that you know if the child is meeting the standard. So it was an effort in just making one document so it was not clumsy for the field.
And so when you're out in the field, if you talk about, Common Core alignment, are you working with a Common Core? I would definitely ask the question, like, what document are you using? Because if they're going to the actual Common Core document on in the national or in New York State's P to 12 Common Core document, they are getting the Common Core standards for English and math. That's all they're getting. And so I always say, don't use that. And you have permission to say, don't use that for pre-K. Use this. Because when you open up to the cognition and knowledge of the world portion, there are your math standards. When you open up to communication, language, and literacy, there are your English standards, verbatim, and you have it couched in research, couched in the clarity of what these things mean, and additional communication, language, and literacy standards that are absolutely critical for students to have that weren't included in the New York State Common Core pre-kindergarten piece of it. So you have permission to say, don't use those standards, use those standards, don't use that document, use this, and send them to this document, because it's a much better document in terms of meeting the needs of all of the students, or meeting all the needs of the students. So after the guiding principles that Lynette was talking about are listed, I'll talk a little bit about them here. Lynette can jump in because she definitely has a better understanding of them individually than I do. And some of them are kind of no-brainers, but they have to be said, because not everybody puts these beliefs, not everyone's able to implement these beliefs in a way that we can see in the classroom. So all children are capable of learning, and the pre-K foundation is for all children, regardless of their limitations, or as Ken and we should work on pointing out, as long as, even if they bring things that are very different to the table than we're used to. They're all capable of learning, even if they won't even talk to you for a little while. But they also do develop at different rates, and they appropriate reasonable supports and accommodations have to be provided for them to succeed. This is a great guiding principle to have, because it does recognize that children develop at different rates, and that each child is unique, and teachers and districts and communities can go at that from two ways. They can use it as an excuse for low rigor, or they can use it as an opportunity to find ways to support students' learning. And you've probably seen both. Well, he's just a little slow developmentally. Well, so what are you doing about that? How can we address the first guiding principle? You don't want to see them use this as an excuse, because it really is an opportunity. The third guiding principle, active learners and purposeful play. We sometimes get calls from teachers who are a little bit frantic at the early level saying the Common Core, the superintendent of our district, especially schools that are attached, pre-kindergartens that are attached to public schools, we get concerned, teachers saying they want us to take our centers out. They want these things to happen, they want those things.
Absolutely.
It is not only inappropriate to remove centers, and I don't want to say the word developmentally inappropriate, but it's just inappropriate. If you know children, and you know the way children learn, play at this point is absolutely critical. The word being purposeful. So the centers need to have some connection to an academic base. The centers need to be aligned to the curriculum. They need to be aligned to the domains. But it is absolutely not okay to have students sitting at the pre-kindergarten level for hours on end. It just isn't. And so I don't know what these people envision kids are doing for this time, but sitting is not okay. And with that comes the intentional planning. So purposeful play through rich learning experiences. Multidimensional. It's integrated and occurs simultaneously across all domains, which are interrelated. And it's sad to see that kind of disappear as the grades move up, because really we all learn well like that when we can see the relationships between different things. And at preschool especially, it's very important. And we'll be doing some work with that a little bit later. And so you'll see that when it might be hard to separate the domains sometimes, but it is with what you're seeing. But it's going to be important for you to be aware of what those domains are and how they work in the classroom. Children learn, this is the family connection piece. They learn in the context of interactions and relationships with family members and community. And again, it's easy for some people to look at community as a deficit, but every community, every parent cares about their child's education. How that looks, every parent is clear that education is important for children to be successful in life. How that plays out is different, obviously, in different communities, but all communities have something to offer. Not all communities share the same values or history or cultural background that most of the teachers share. You know that most teachers in New York State right now are 98% look like most of us. White, young, fabulous looking. I'm kidding. But most of white female teachers, that's what we have in New York State. And actually over half our population is either white, is not white. So you have a very different culture, sometimes teaching, than you have in the classroom. And that's where that cultural capital piece comes in. That's where Ken Chi's kind of message about doing no harm, although he didn't say it like that, you don't want to set up blocks. So that communication with family is, and community is important, and the recognition that communities have something to offer. Significant contributor to lifelong learning and development. Engaging parents, making them feel welcome, especially parents who have not traditionally felt welcome in the school setting. And there are a lot of those, as I'm sure that you've come across, that whole ghost in the classroom kind of thing. The pre-kindergarten foundation can be used to empower parents, teachers, and caregivers, and that's how we like to look at this document. It's an empowering document in a way that the Common Core separated from it is not an empowering document. This is, it's kind of a guidance document. This is a really empowering document. And it respects the rich backgrounds of children. Lynette, do you want to offer anything at this point?
No, but the only comment I would make is, many times when people receive these in the mail or download them from a website or get them passed on to them from other colleagues, they don't take the time to look at these guiding principles, and that's really why we're taking the time this morning. They're easy to skip over, but this was the foundation on which the pre-K foundation was built. So we want to make sure that we take a moment to review it. It's really kind of important. If you look at the goals of all of your standards that we've developed for, Quality Stores New York, they also fall into these kinds of guiding principles. So I thought it would just be nice for you to take a minute and go through them.
I just wanted to make an observation. I find it very interesting that you don't say young children, because I think these guiding principles apply to all children. We could go from pre-K to 12 with these principles. And number 2, I would like to ask you to put a tagline on all your emails about number 3.
About number 3.
Oh yeah.
Can you have SED put that on all your?
I don't know, you think we could?
Children are active learners.
Oh, yes. That would be lovely.
Yeah. That's the reason, I have yet to meet any of I have 2 boys, I have yet to meet any of their friends that when you ask them what their favorite subject in school is, don't say phys ed.
Right.
Every single one of them. Nobody says math, nobody says science, nobody says English. Phys ed, math, art. That's it. Because those are the places where they can be active. And those are the outlets. So the children are active learners. You can make math active, you can make ELA active. And we do agree, actually, that it would be wonderful not just to have the guiding principles apply to P to 12, but the domains of learning. I would love to insert those ELA and math standards into larger domains of learning that the state says, this is what learning looks like. You know, I think everybody would like that to happen. I don't know if it's going to happen anytime soon, but we do recognize that.
Yeah.
That's,
I mean, I think that what you were saying, Lynette, is that when people open this, what they turn to is the cognitive domain and ignore the rest.
I think that could be.
No, if they read that much. But, you know, if you could at least make posters about the guiding principles.
Well, it's really interesting because, again, this started back in 2007, and it was really, it took a long time to convince the Board of Regents that we needed early learning standards of some kind for those pre-K kids. And once we did, then it was put into the 2007 state budget regulations. So the governor was saying, Spitzer was saying, he was governor at the time, we need to have standards for pre-K, the same as we have them for K to 12. So this was our call to finally go into action. So that's really how this one got
when I was
started.
ready.
But I think this is an opportunity for your learning communities to raise this up, because as you said, that, you know, we know that these things are ignored. And we can, you know, you're talking to the choir here, Christine, you know it. But we can help to move the message.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
my actual question is inherent in the tone of your voice and in the tone of our urgency, is the fact that most administrators who run the schools where the UBK programs are being added to really have, just like you, no idea of what it really means to be a child, first of all, of that age, and then the concept of what is developmental. Because that really can lead into everything that's really done all the way. However, my question is there a portion of funding to instruct those principals or those administrators, or to, you know, because that's you have to walk a very careful walk, to really bring that in, because that is just something that is just delegated to those people who are, you know, this much of our budget. And so, anyway, so that's my question. Is there a tool, is there a way, when working with principals, you know, it's a very careful place to walk, and so, which is
I would
what
ask,
we're
is there a
doing.
plan to get
Yeah.
the principals who are not generally early childhood people to help understand this?
What does this really mean?
Well, the
when we have a
UPK
UPK
teachers
program?
aren't generally
And it's
early
really,
childhood
you know,
people
not
either.
really
Yeah,
what-
no,
And
this
that's a
needs to be-
huge problem.
Yeah.
So I just see that as an area for focus in a very careful manner to see what does it mean, you know, it's really not gonna be a sore in your backside, it's gonna really be an addition that's gonna actually align your whole program eventually with things that we see later on. And so anyway, I'm just bringing that up as a question, if it's been a consideration or if it's just something that's an assumption that's not being addressed. I wanna shine a little bit of a light to that.
Absolutely.
That's a really great question, and I do have some information about budgets and all that kind of stuff, but I'm wondering if we can.
We can hold off.
Parking lot.
Let's put a parking lot
I
on
was gonna
there.
say, and I'll get back to you, let's go through this first.
Yeah.
Because as you go through it, you may find that there's other things we wanna talk to principals about.
Right.
I do have a private joke about administrators, and sometimes there's a fast track.
Yeah.
You want me to turn it off?
Sometimes